In the heart of Bavaria, Germany, deep within a remote forest, stood a farm. The year was 1922. The farm's name was Hinterkaifeck. It was a place of isolation, miles from the nearest village, swallowed by the silence of the woods. What happened, there was not just a crime. It was a descent into a nightmare that has haunted Germany for a century. This is the story of the 6 people who lived there, and the 7th person who was already inside. It began with a whisper of unease. Days before the slaughter, the 63-year-old farmer, Andreas Gruber, found something that made his blood run cold. Fresh footprints in the newly fallen snow. They led out of the dense forest, walked directly to the farmhouse, and stopped. There were no tracks leading away. It was as if someone, or something, had simply vanished into the walls of his home. Andreas scoured the property, the woods, everywhere. He found nothing. That night, the house began to breathe with an unseen presence. Andreas and his family heard sounds from the attic. Not the scuttling of mice, but the slow, heavy tread of footsteps. Armed with a lantern and his resolve, Andreas climbed the ladder to investigate. The attic was empty. Dust lay undisturbed. Yet, night after night, the footsteps returned, a phantom pacing above their heads while they tried to sleep. The family was living on a knife's edge, constantly looking over their shoulders. The signs grew more ominous. A set of house keys vanished without a trace. A newspaper from Munich, a city miles away, mysteriously appeared on the porch. Tools went missing from the shed, only to reappear in strange places. The family maid, who had been with them for years, suddenly packed her bags and fled. She was terrified, claiming the house was haunted, that she could hear voices and feel a presence watching her. She left just 6 months before the tragedy, a decision that saved her life. In her place, a new maid arrived, Maria Baumgartner. She would be dead within hours of starting her new job. None of them understood the true nature of the threat. They believed in ghosts, in spirits. The reality was far more terrestrial and far more terrifying. They weren't alone in their home. The final day was March 31st, 1922. It was a cold Friday evening. Inside the farmhouse were Andreas Gruber, his wife Cecilia, their widowed daughter Victoria, and Victoria's 2 young children, 7-year-old Cecilia and 2-year-old Joseph, and of course, the new maid Maria. As darkness blanketed the isolated farm, the family began their evening chores. Police investigators would later theorize that the killer used a simple chilling tactic to begin the massacre. They believed the family members were lured out to the barn, one by one. Perhaps they heard a strange noise from the stables, or a cow in distress. One person went to check, then another went to see what was taking so long. A chain of curiosity and concern that led them all to their doom. Inside the barn, hidden in the shadows, the killer waited. The weapon of choice was a mattock, a common farming tool with a pick on one side and an adze on the other. It was heavy, brutal, and designed for breaking earth. In the killer's hands, it became an instrument of pure butchery. One by one, as they entered the barn, they were met with unimaginable violence. Andreas was likely the first, struck down from behind. Then his wife, Cecilia. Then his daughter, Victoria. And finally, little 7-year-old Cecilia. Each blow was delivered with crushing force to the head. The scene was a tableau of horror blood soaking the hay-strewn floor, bodies lying where they fell. The barn door was shut, sealing the first chapter of this horrific night. But the killer wasn't finished. The murderer then left the silence of the barn and walked back towards the house. The work was only half done. Upstairs, in his crib, lay 2-year-old Joseph. In her own room, the new maid Maria was likely preparing for bed, oblivious to the carnage just yards away. The killer entered the house, climbed the stairs, and continued the slaughter. Joseph was killed in his cot. Maria was slain in her bedchamber. The autopsy reports would later reveal details that compound the horror. One of the children, young Cecilia, didn't die instantly. She had survived for several hours after her skull was fractured, and in her agony, she had torn out clumps of her own hair. This small, heartbreaking detail paints a picture of suffering that is almost too difficult to comprehend. Every single person on the farm was now dead. But here is where the story of Hinterkaifeck twists from a brutal murder into something truly bizarre and unsettling. The killer did not flee. For at least 3 days, maybe more, someone stayed in the house with the 6 corpses. They didn't just hide. They lived there. Neighbors later reported seeing smoke rising from the chimney during the weekend. The farm animals, the cows, the chickens were fed and cared for. Someone ate meals in the kitchen and slept in one of the beds. The killer was playing house, surrounded by the bodies of the family they had just annihilated. A dog on the farm barked incessantly, alarming nearby residents, but no one dared to approach the isolated property. The mail carrier noticed the mail piling up. School teachers noted the children's absence. Still, 4 long days passed before anyone went to investigate. On April 4th, a search party of neighbors finally arrived at Hinterkaifeck. The farm was eerily quiet. The front door was locked. After forcing their way into the barn, they made the gruesome discovery. 4 bodies were found, stacked and partially covered with hay. The search party then entered the house, where they found the bodies of the baby and the maid in their beds. The scene was so horrific that the first men on site were physically sick. The police were called, and one of the most extensive and frustrating murder investigations in German history began. The autopsies, conducted in the barn itself, revealed the brutal nature of the attacks. But they also uncovered stranger details. Victoria showed signs of strangulation, suggesting the killer toyed with the bodies after death. The motive was clearly not robbery. A large sum of money was found untouched in the house. This was personal. This was rage. This was an act of profound evil. The investigation was massive. Over 100 suspects were interviewed over the years, but no one was ever charged. Theories ranged from a jealous lover of Victoria's to a vengeful former husband thought to have died in the war. Some even suspected Andreas Gruber himself had a dark secret that came back to haunt him. Clairvoyants were consulted. The skulls of the victims were sent to psychics, all in a desperate attempt to find answers. But every lead went cold. Every path led to a dead end. The most chilling theory, and the one that fits the strange evidence of the footsteps and attic noises, is that the killer had been living secretly inside the house for days, perhaps even months, before the murders. Hiding in the attic, listening to the family's every move, sharing their food, breathing their air. A silent, patient predator, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. In the end, the Hinterkaifeck farm was demolished in 1923, less than a year after the murders. The locals hoped that by tearing it down, they could erase the stain of the tragedy. But some stories refuse to be buried. The land remains empty, and locals say a strange aura still hangs over the place where the farm once stood. They speak of whispers carried on the wind through the dark Bavarian forest. And sometimes, they say, when the snow is fresh and the night is still, new footprints can be found, leading from the tree line towards the empty field where a family once lived. Tracks that arrive, but never leave. The mystery of Hinterkaifeck is a chilling reminder that sometimes the greatest threat isn't the stranger lurking outside, but the one you don't know is already in. What you can't see is what you should fear the most. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as chilling as we did, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the world's most haunting mysteries. Stay safe out there.